The control room hummed with a low, steady vibration, a mechanical heartbeat that resonated through the concordant flagship Dominion. Supreme Commander Vyrek Sarian stood at the central observation deck, his imposing figure framed by the vast expanse of space. Through the reinforced observation windows, the remnants of Arcadia Prime smoldered, its once vibrant cities reduced to glowing embers scattered across the surface like a fractured mosaic. The stench of ozone and scorched metal hung in the air, carried from the adjacent weapons bay by the relentless churn of the ship's ventilation system. Sarian inhaled deeply, savoring the faint bitterness that spoke of absolute power. "Magnificent," he muttered, his voice a rumble of satisfaction. His eyes, cold and calculating, drank in the destruction below, like an artist admiring their masterpiece. "Commander!" a voice interrupted. Sub-Adjutant Cale approached with cautious precision, his taloned feet clicking softly against the polished floor. "The broadcast is ready on all frequencies." Sarian turned, his chromatophores flickering faintly, signaling amusement. "Then let us proceed. It is time humanity understands the futility of resistance." He strode to the central console, where a holographic interface shimmered to life under his touch. The sharp glow of the screen painted his angular features in hues of silver and cyan, giving him an almost spectral appearance. Cale hesitated. "Sir, reports suggest that some human colonies are already mobilizing." "Let them scramble," Sarian cut him off, his tone sharp as shattered glass. "What can insects accomplish against the boot that crushes them?" He adjusted the input, his voice now projected across the stars, reaching Earth and its colonies. "People of Earth," he began, his tone heavy with disdain, "observe the ruins of Arcadia Prime. This was your proudest colony, a testament to your so-called ingenuity. Now it is ash, its inhabitants mere shadows etched into the ground. Let this serve as a warning. On Earth, in the shadow of a dimly lit war room buried beneath kilometers of reinforced concrete, Commander Adrian Dorn watched the broadcast in silence. The image of Arcadia's destruction filled the central holoscreen, its devastation framed by the concordant fleet hovering above like a constellation of predators. Around him, his officers shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale and drawn. The crackle of the broadcast filled the room. Sarian's voice was both taunting and surgical, carving into their morale with every word. "You will submit," he continued. "You will kneel before the concordant, or suffer the fate of Arcadia Prime. You have 20 planetary rotations to surrender. Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving the war room in a suffocating silence. The faint hum of outdated equipment and the sterile smell of recycled air only heightened the sense of desolation. "Bastard," someone muttered, their voice laced with venom. Dorn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough!" He stepped forward, his boots echoing sharply against the steel floor. His presence was commanding, his features a blend of weariness and resolve. He gestured toward the holographic map of the solar system, where tiny red blips marked concordant fleets inching closer to Earth's orbit. "We knew this day would come. We've prepared for it." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but Dorn continued, his voice steady. "They think we're insects. They believe our ingenuity ends where their superiority begins. Let them." "And what of Arcadia?" asked Lieutenant Grace Voss, her voice cracking. 12 million lives, Commander. They burned them alive." Dorn's expression darkened, his gaze hardening into flint. "We mourn them, but we do not break." He paused, the weight of his words settling over the room like a lead curtain. "Activate Project Horizon." The room shifted, the air thickening with a sudden sense of purpose. Officers scrambled to their stations, their hands moving swiftly over consoles as data streams came to life. A quiet buzz filled the air, a chorus of urgency that drowned out despair. Dorn remained still, his gaze fixed on the map. His voice dropped to a murmur, meant only for himself. Let's see how they fare against a cornered species. The metallic clang of an alert echoed through the command chamber of Dominion, breaking the monotony of the Concordant's calculated advance. Sub-Adjutant Kale's talons raked over his console as streams of data scrolled past in chaotic bursts of color. "Commander," he called, his voice edged with unease, "there's activity in the outer belt. Human vessels are mobilizing." Sarian's gaze flicked to the tactical display. A cluster of red markers, scattered and seemingly disorganized, appeared near the asteroid belt. "A desperate attempt to stall us," he said dismissively. "Proceed with the advance. Crush them." Kale hesitated. "Their movements, they're not entirely chaotic." "Do you question my analysis, Sub-Adjutant?" Sarian's tone carried an undercurrent of menace. Kale lowered his gaze. "No, Supreme Commander, of course not." As Dominion surged forward, the asteroid belt loomed ahead, a sprawling labyrinth of tumbling rocks and shadows, their surfaces glinting faintly in the light of nearby stars. The Concordant fleet followed in perfect formation, their sleek vessels cutting through the void like a blade through water. Hidden within the asteroid field, Commander Dorn stood aboard the Resolute, his breath fogging faintly in the chilled air. The recycled atmosphere carried the sharp tang of oil and ozone, a stark contrast to the warm metallic hum of the ship's systems. Around him, his crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces taut with focus. "Status report," Dorn commanded. "Drones are in position," replied Captain Tobias Vale, his voice low but brimming with anticipation. "Kinetic charges armed. We're ready." Dorn nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Hold position until they're fully inside the belt. No premature movements." The tension in the control room was palpable, every breath a quiet testament to the stakes. Vale leaned closer to Dorn, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You sure this will work?" "It has to," Dorn replied, his tone steely. "They rely on precision. We'll give them chaos." The Concordant fleet advanced deeper into the belt, their sensors mapping the asteroids with meticulous accuracy. Yet they failed to notice the faint, flickering signatures that blended seamlessly with the debris. And then the silence shattered. A surge of light erupted from the darkness as a concealed drone detonated, sending shards of molten rock spiraling into the nearest Concordant frigate. The explosion rippled through the fleet, scattering their formation. Seconds later, more drones ignited, their kinetic payloads tearing through hulls with brutal efficiency. "Ambush!" Kyle shouted, his chromatophores flashing wildly. The bridge of Dominion descended into chaos as alarms blared and officers scrambled to respond. Sarian's eyes burned with fury as he slammed a clawed hand onto the console. "Return fire! Neutralize their positions!" But the humans were ghosts in the asteroid field, their vessels weaving through the labyrinth with uncanny precision. The Resolute emerged briefly from the shadows, its weapons systems unleashing a barrage of plasma fire before vanishing again into the void. Inside the Resolute, Vale grinned fiercely. "They're flailing." Dorn's expression remained grim. "Not for long. Prepare the secondary charge." On Dominion, Kale's voice trembled as he reported, "We're losing ships, Commander. Their strategy—" "Is an annoyance," Sarian roared. "Focus fire, crush them." But even as the Concordant retaliated, the asteroid field seemed to conspire against them. Fragments of debris, propelled by controlled detonations, collided with their ships, fracturing hulls and disrupting systems. As the battle raged, the Resolute launched its final gambit, a barrage of EMP charges that erupted in a cascade of blinding light. Concordant vessels shuddered as their systems flickered and failed, leaving them vulnerable. In the eerie stillness that followed, Dorn's voice crackled over the comms, carried on a private human frequency. "Tobias, get us out of here. We've done enough." The Resolute and its fleet disappeared into the void, leaving the battered remnants of the Concordant to drift in silence. On board Dominion, Sarian's rage boiled over, his voice a guttural growl. "They will pay for this insolence." But even as he spoke, a seed of doubt took root, its presence as unwelcome as it was undeniable. The metallic tang of blood and burnt circuitry filled the command deck of the Resolute. The air was thick, charged with the aftermath of battle, each breath a reminder of the tension that had seized the crew moments ago. Commander Adrian Dorn stood at the center of the chaos, his expression carved from stone. Around him, the hum of overstressed consoles and the frantic voices of his officers echoed like a symphony of survival. "Report," he ordered, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. Captain Tobias Vale leaned against a support beam, one hand clutching a hastily wrapped wound on his arm. Despite the pain, his smirk remained intact, a defiant badge of their victory. "We crippled at least 15 of their ships, Commander. They're regrouping, but slowly. The EMPs hit harder than we thought." Dorn's gaze flicked to the tactical display. The asteroid belt was a glowing map of destruction, with concordant ships scattered like broken toys. Yet the flickers of their recovery were already visible, engines sputtering to life, weapon systems recalibrating. They wouldn't stay crippled for long. "They'll learn," Dorn said quietly. His tone carried no triumph, only the weight of inevitability. "And when they do, they'll come back stronger." Dr. Elena Graves, her face streaked with soot and her lab coat singed, stepped into the light. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto Dorn. "We need to move. If they recover before we're gone, we'll be swarmed. And I'm not sure this ship can handle another barrage." Dorn nodded, but his focus lingered on the display. "Not yet. Let them think they're winning." The ship shuddered beneath their feet as a distant explosion rocked the asteroid field. Fragments of rock danced like fireflies outside the viewing port, illuminated by the cold glow of distant stars. The visual chaos masked their escape routes, but it also threatened to become a deadly labyrinth if the Resolute lingered too long. "Commander?" shouted an ensign from the navigation console, their voice high with urgency. "Multiple concordant vessels are converging on our position." "Good," Dorn said, his tone sharp enough to silence the room. "That's exactly what we need." Vale raised an eyebrow, his usual humor tempered by genuine concern. "Care to enlighten us on how cornering ourselves in a floating graveyard helps humanity?" Dorn stepped closer to the hollow map, his fingers tracing the outlines of the asteroid belt. "This isn't a graveyard, it's a proving ground. The concordant strength lies in their precision, their predictability. They'll move in formations, deploy standard responses. But here," he gestured to the tangled maze of rocks and debris, "here, those strengths are weaknesses. We don't fight their war, we make them fight ours." Graves frowned. "That's a gamble, Commander. If they adapt too quickly, they won't." His voice was ironclad. "Not in time." As if to punctuate his statement, the lights dimmed for a moment before stabilizing. The ship groaned, its systems struggling under the strain of makeshift repairs. The quiet, omnipresent smell of overheating components underscored the precariousness of their situation. "Engineering," Dorn barked into his comm. "How's our power?" A gravelly voice crackled in response, layered with static and exhaustion. "Holding for now, but if you're planning any more miracles, Commander, I'd suggest you pray to something mechanical. We're running on hope and duct tape down here." Dorn allowed himself the briefest flicker of a smile. "Noted. Keep us running." The Resolute drifted deeper into the field, its battered hull blending into the shadows. Around it, silent drones flitted like specters, carrying payloads of explosives and disinformation beacons. These tools, crude compared to the Concordant's pristine technology, had one advantage: unpredictability. "Deploy the decoys," Dorn ordered, his voice low. "Let's see how disciplined they really are." Outside, the drones activated in bursts of light, mimicking the signatures of human ships. On the Concordant flagship Dominion, chaos unfolded. "Sir, detecting multiple vessels." Cale's voice was sharp, his talons tapping furiously on his console. "They're everywhere. Asteroidal shadows, human ships, drones." Virek Sarian loomed over the tactical display, his chromatophores flickering with suppressed rage. The holographic map was a tangled web of signals, each pulsing with maddening inconsistency. "Disperse and destroy them. Wipe this infestation from the void." The Concordant ships spread out, their movements precise yet strained by the unpredictability of the terrain. The drones flared and vanished, leading the fleet on a chase through the maze of rock and wreckage. "Commander, they're taking the bait," Graves reported, "but not for long." "That's all we need," Dorn replied. His hand hovered over the console, his fingers tense. "Prepare to ignite the field." The air on the Resolute thickened with anticipation. Every breath felt heavier, as if laden with the weight of the moment. The faint hum of the engines seemed louder, vibrating through the deck plates and into their bones. "Now," Dorn said. A cascade of detonations lit the asteroid field like a chain of dying stars. Kinetic charges erupted, sending shards of rock hurtling through space with devastating speed. Concordant ships, caught in the chaos, collided with debris or one another, their once perfect formations shattered. On the Dominion, Sarian watched in disbelief as his fleet faltered. His chromatophores darkened, signaling his growing fury. "Enough of this," he roared. "Pull them back into formation. We will not be toyed with by primitives." Cale hesitated. "Sir, the formations, they're not responding." Sarian turned on him, his voice a guttural snarl. "What do you mean, not responding?" "Their communications," Cale began, but another officer cut in. "Commander, human vessels detected. They're targeting our damaged ships." Dorn's fleet emerged from the shadows, their weapons blazing with calculated precision. Each shot found its mark, exploiting the confusion and disarray sown by the decoys and explosions. "Hit them hard," Dorn commanded, his tone unyielding, "and disappear before they can retaliate." As the Resolute fired its final salvo, the ship shuddered under the recoil. Vale grinned, despite the flicker of warning lights across his console. "They're reeling, Commander. I think we just gave them a headache they won't forget." Dorn didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, where the Concordant's fleet struggled to regroup. "It's not over," he said finally. "Not yet." Graves stepped closer, her voice low. "What's next? We can't keep this up forever." "We won't have to," Dorn replied, his gaze hardening. "The catalyst will be ready soon." Her eyes widened. "You're serious? It's still untested?" "It's our only chance." His words were a steel trap, closing the conversation. "For now, we keep them guessing. And when the time comes..." He let the sentence hang, the weight of its meaning pressing down on everyone in the room. Outside, the Concordant's fleet flickered in the distance, a wounded predator still dangerous in its desperation. In the silence that followed, the hum of the Resolute's engines felt almost deafening, a reminder that every second mattered. "Take us deeper into the shadows," Dorn ordered. "We need more time." As the Resolute vanished into the asteroid field, its crew braced for what was to come. Each breath carried the weight of uncertainty, every glance a silent question. In the void beyond, the Concordant licked its wounds, its fury mounting. But even as Sarian prepared his next move, a deeper mystery loomed, the catalyst, and when it arrived, it would change everything. The Resolute drifted in the asteroid field, its exterior blackened and scarred, the faint glow of its engines swallowed by the surrounding darkness. Inside the command deck, the air buzzed with urgency, every movement purposeful, every word clipped and precise. The distant echoes of repairs reverberated through the walls like whispers of desperation. Commander Adrian Dorn stood at the center, his sharp gaze fixed on the holomap. The display flickered with fractured projections of the Concordant fleet, their once disciplined formations now scattered and uneven. Despite their losses, the aliens were regrouping, their larger numbers ensuring they could absorb humanity's initial blows. "Status on the catalyst?" Dorn asked, his voice sharp but calm, cutting through the background hum of stressed machinery. Dr. Elena Graves, her lab coat singed and her fingers smudged with grease, approached, holding a data pad. The faint smell of ozone and burnt metal clung to her, a testament to the frenzy in the ship's engineering bay. "The fleet is operational. Barely. The AI adaptive systems are stabilizing, but this is still untested tech, Commander. If it fails..." Dorn didn't flinch. "If it fails, we're dead anyway." Graves hesitated, her jaw tightening as she glanced at the display. "The Catalyst ships are unlike anything we've ever deployed. Hybrid tech, adaptive cores, weapon systems capable of recalibrating mid-fire, but the AI is unpredictable. If it decides..." "It won't decide," Dorn interrupted. His voice lowered, carrying an edge of steel. "It'll follow orders. Ours." Vale leaned against a console, his usual grin dimmed but present. A blood-stained bandage wrapped around his forearm like a badge of survival. "So, what's the play? Unleash the shiny new toys and hope they don't explode in our faces?" Dorn turned toward him, the faint overhead light casting harsh shadows on his face. "Number. The play is to make them think we're still scrambling. We keep up the illusion until they overcommit." He gestured to the map where red indicators marked Concordant reinforcements converging on their position. "We'll deploy the Catalyst fleet in waves, striking their supply lines first, hit their weakest points, and draw them into a kill zone." Vale whistled low. "Bold, reckless. I like it." Graves crossed her arms, her frown deepening. "And if they see through it?" "Then we adapt," Dorn replied, "just like we've always done." The hum of the ship's systems deepened as the Catalyst fleet's final activation commands were transmitted. In the hangars of hidden human bases across the Asteroid Belt, sleek vessels came to life. Unlike the patchwork ships of humanity's earlier efforts, these were seamless, their hulls gleaming with alien alloys. The faint whine of their engines resonated with a haunting melody, a sound born of two civilizations merging. Back on the Dominion, Supreme Commander Vyrek Sarian paced the bridge, his talons clicking against the polished floor. The air around him was heavy with the scent of coolant and the faint, acrid tang of burned-out circuits. His chromatophores flickered erratically, betraying his simmering frustration. "Report," he barked, his voice a low growl that sent a ripple of unease through his officers. Kyle, hunched over a console, didn't look up. The humans remain concealed in the asteroid field. Their movements are inconsistent, difficult to predict. Sarian's claws dug into the arm of his chair. "Incompetence. That's what I hear, Kale. They're vermin, scurrying in the shadows. Crush them. Kale's voice faltered. Commander, their technology, it's primitive, Sarian snapped. Inferior. Do not waste my time with excuses. As the Dominion pressed deeper into the field, a flash of light erupted on the far side of the asteroids. Concordant monitors lit up with chaotic signals as a catalyst ship emerged, its silhouette cutting through the darkness like a predator stalking wounded prey. The ship's adaptive AI targeted a concordant cruiser with unerring precision, its energy weapons carving through shields in seconds. What is that? Kale whispered, his chromatophores paling with unease. Sarian's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a hiss. The humans have made a mistake. They've revealed their hand too early. Destroy it. The Dominion's fleet surged forward, their weapon systems locking onto the catalyst ship. But before the first volley could connect, the human vessel vanished into the shadows, its engines leaving behind only the faintest distortion in the void. On the Resolute, the bridge erupted in cheers as the display updated, showing the catalyst ship's successful retreat. Dorn allowed himself the faintest smile. Phase 1 complete. Now we make them bleed. He turned to Graves. Activate the decoy patterns. Make them think that ship was an isolated deployment. Graves hesitated. And the rest of the fleet? Dorn's smile vanished. Hold them back. Let the Concordant think we're desperate. When they push too far, we'll show them what desperation really looks like. The Catalyst fleet moved with eerie precision, their adaptive AI systems calculating angles and trajectories faster than any human mind. Each ship operated as part of a greater whole, their maneuvers fluid and unpredictable. They struck at supply lines and command ships, vanishing before the Concordant could respond. On the Dominion, Sarian's frustration boiled over. This is not a war. It's a mockery. Where is their fleet? Where is their resistance? Kyle hesitated before responding. Commander, their tactics. They're using the terrain, forcing us to fight on their terms. Sarian's chromatophores flared with rage. Then we burn the terrain. I want this field cleared. No more shadows for them to hide in. Back on the Resolute, Vale leaned toward Dorn, his voice low. You think they'll take the bait? They don't have a choice, Dorn replied. Their arrogance is their weakness. They think they're gods, unchallenged for millennia. We'll remind them what mortals can do. The Resolute's engines roared to life as the ship joined the fray, its weapons targeting a Concordant frigate. Around it, the Catalyst fleet struck with brutal efficiency, their hybrid technology tearing through the enemy's defenses. In the chaos, Graves monitored the AI systems, her fingers flying over the console. The adaptive cores are holding, but they're learning faster than expected. If we push them too hard, we won't have to, Dorn interrupted. His gaze remained fixed on the display, where the Dominion loomed in the distance. Sarian will overextend himself, and when he does, Vale finished the thought with a grin. We'll be there to finish the job. The bridge of the Resolute filled with the electric hum of tension as the battle raged on. The smell of scorched metal and the acrid bite of overheated systems clung to the air, mingling with the quiet determination of the crew. Outside, the void burned with the light of 100 skirmishes, each one a testament to humanity's defiance. As the Dominion pushed deeper into the field, its movements became increasingly erratic, its formations unraveling under the pressure of the Catalyst fleet's precision strikes. Dorn watched, his expression unreadable, as the map shifted in their favor. Prepare the final phase, he ordered, and send the signal to the fleet. It's time to show them what we've built. In the shadows of the Asteroid Belt, the remaining Catalyst ships powered up, their engines humming with a resonant energy that seemed to vibrate through the void. The battle was far from over, but the tide was turning, and Sarian, blind to the trap closing around him, pressed forward, his fury leading him ever closer to his own undoing. The asteroid field burned with the light of devastation, wreckage spinning silently in the void like discarded remnants of a forgotten era. The Dominion pressed deeper, its fractured fleet trailing behind, each vessel a testament to the Concordant's unraveling control. Inside the Resolute, Commander Adrian Dorn stood at the center of a tense, expectant bridge. The hum of the engines was a low, steady pulse that matched the tempo of his thoughts. "All ships report ready," Captain Vale said, his usual humor replaced by a rare solemnity. His gaze flicked to the tactical display, where the Catalyst fleet hovered in perfect formation, a hunter waiting to strike. Dorn's voice was calm but heavy with purpose. "Then it's time. Signal the fleet to engage." Outside, the Catalyst ships surged forward, their adaptive AI calculating paths through the chaos with surgical precision. Each vessel moved as if guided by an unseen hand, weaving between debris and concordant fire. They struck without hesitation, their hybrid weapons slicing through shields and hulls as if they were paper. On the Dominion, Supreme Commander Vyrek Sarian gripped the edge of his console, his chromatophores flaring wildly with frustration. The bridge reeked of burnt circuits, the acrid tang of failure hanging in the air like a ghost. "What is this?" he snarled, his voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms. "They're ships. They move like no fleet I've ever seen." Kyle's voice trembled as he responded. "Their technology. It's evolving mid-combat, Commander. Every maneuver we counter, they adapt instantly." Sarian's gaze snapped to the tactical display, where his fleet was crumbling under the Catalyst assault. "Then destroy them. Overwhelm them with numbers." Kyle hesitated, his claws twitching over the controls. "Our numbers. They're not enough." The words hung in the air, heavier than the crushing silence that followed. Sarian's chromatophores darkened, his rage eclipsed by a creeping sense of dread. "Impossible," he hissed, his voice a guttural whisper. "They are primitives. This is an aberration." Back on the Resolute, Dr. Elena Graves leaned over her console, her fingers flying over the interface as data streamed across the screen. "The Catalyst AI is holding steady," she reported, her voice taut with controlled urgency. "But they're reaching their limit. The Concordance fleet is too large for sustained engagement." "They won't need to sustain it," Dorn replied. His tone was steel, unyielding. "This ends now." He turned to Vale, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Prepare the decisive protocol." Vale's breath hitched. "You're serious? That'll—" "I know what it will do," Dorn interrupted, his voice low but firm. "We've come this far. We don't stop now." Graves shot him a look, her brow furrowed. "If the protocol fails, we'll lose everything. There won't be a second chance." Dorn's expression didn't waver. "There won't need to be." The Resolute surged forward, leading the charge as the Catalyst fleet pressed the attack. Concordant ships faltered under the relentless assault, their precision unraveling in the face of humanity's chaotic brilliance. But even as victory loomed on the horizon, the cost was clear. Human vessels burned alongside their enemies, their sacrifices etched into the void. Inside the Dominion, Sarian's composure shattered. His voice rose in a frenzied roar. "All ships, focus fire on their command vessels. Crush them now!" Kyle hesitated. "Commander, the data from their broadcast." "Forget the broadcast." Sarian's claws raked across the console, sparks flying as he snarled. "Destroy them before they destroy us." But it was too late. Dorn's voice echoed through the Resolute's bridge, calm and steady despite the chaos surrounding him. Activate the decisive protocol. Graves hesitated for the briefest of moments, her fingers hovering over the console. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed the final command. The Catalyst fleet shifted, their formations tightening as energy readings spiked across the board. Their adaptive AI, unshackled by human limitations, synchronized in perfect harmony. The air on the Resolute grew heavy, charged with the hum of power. Outside, the void seemed to hold its breath, and then the Catalyst ships unleashed their full potential. A wave of energy erupted from the fleet, rippling through space like the shock wave of a dying star. Concordant ships buckled under the strain, their shields collapsing in an instant. The Catalyst fleet didn't just attack, they dismantled. Weapon systems short-circuited, engines sputtered, and entire vessels were reduced to inert hulks drifting aimlessly in the void. On the Dominion, alarms blared as the ship shuddered violently. Sarian staggered, his chromatophores flaring with panic. What have they done?" Kale's voice was barely audible over the cacophony. "They've rewritten the rules. They're weapons. They're not just destroying us. They're undoing us." Back on the Resolute, the bridge was silent, the crew transfixed by the sight of the Concordant fleet unraveling before their eyes. Vale let out a low whistle, his voice tinged with awe. "Well, I'll be damned." Graves leaned back in her chair, her face pale but resolute. The protocol worked. Barely. Dorn nodded, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. "Good. Now let's finish this." The Resolute surged forward, its weapons blazing as it led the final charge. The remaining Concordant ships, broken and scattered, offered little resistance. Within minutes, the once mighty fleet was reduced to wreckage, the void littered with the remnants of their hubris. As the dust settled, Dorn's voice cut through the stillness, quiet but commanding. "Open a channel, all frequencies." Graves hesitated, then nodded, activating the comms. Dorn stepped forward, his voice steady as he spoke, his words carried across the stars. "To the Concordant and all who hear this," he began, his tone laced with quiet defiance. "You sought to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. You sought to break us, to bend us to your will, but you failed." He paused, his gaze hardening. "We are not conquerors. We are not invaders, but we are survivors, and we will not kneel." Back on the Dominion, Sarian collapsed into his chair, his chromatophores dimming as the weight of his failure settled over him. Around him, his officers stood in stunned silence, their pride shattered. Dorn's voice continued, relentless. "This is your lesson. We may fall, but we rise. We may falter, but we endure. And when you seek to erase us, we do not fade. We fight." The channel went silent, the weight of his words lingering in the void. On the Resolute, the crew erupted into cheers, their voices filled with a mix of triumph and relief. But Dorn remained still, his gaze distant as he stared out at the wreckage. Vale approached, his grin returning. "Hell of a speech, Commander." Dorn allowed himself a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't a speech. It was a warning. Outside, the Catalyst fleet regrouped, their hybrid forms a testament to humanity's ingenuity and defiance. The void, once filled with the arrogance of the Concordant, now belonged to humanity. As the Resolute turned toward Earth, Dorn's voice dropped to a whisper, carried only by the silence of the stars. "They wanted to show us our place. We showed them we have none.